1, you're live, Chair.
Good evening and welcome to this Central Area Planning Committee meeting on Wednesday the 30th of August 2023. I declare the meeting open. My name is Councillor John Driver and I am the chair of this committee. Members, we are streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting you are giving your consent to being recorded. During each item, please put your hand up to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you to speak at the appropriate time. Could I ask members to avoid approaching the top table, as this could create interference with the cameras and the live stream. Please note that the YouTube live stream sound recording is dependent on the correct use of the microphones. Therefore, can I ask that when invited to speak, you remember to turn your microphone on and turn it off when finished. Please reference a page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers, and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. May I have apologies for absence, please, Clerk?
Thank you, Chair. We've received an apology for absence from Councillor Lay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On to item 3, minutes. It is recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of July 2023 found on pages 7 to 8 are approved as a true and accurate record. I so move. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Spenceley, thank you. Can we agree by assent? Agree. Thank you very much. Item 4, declarations of interest. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraph 9 and appendix B of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interest as soon as they become aware, should the need arise during the meeting. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Stilts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest in that I know the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spenceley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest as I know the applicant as a fellow trustee of the Maldon Festival. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spenceley. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest as I know the applicant.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I also know the applicant, so similar to other councillors.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Shaughnessy. So on to agenda item 5, found on pages 9 to 24. Ms Matthews, do you think you could present the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. So this application is for a proposed change of use from Class EE osteopath treatment rooms to a sui generis short-term holiday-let accommodation. This slide shows the location of the site. So this is on the High Street, and we've got the High Street along the northern boundary and White Horse Lane along the southern boundary. This is just a larger version of the same plan, really. This is a block plan which shows the location of the rooms that are subject of the application, which are adjacent to the White Horse Lane boundary of the application site. And this is the existing first floor layout showing the rooms that are again subject to the application. And this is the proposed layout for the holiday let, so 1-bedroomed holiday let. That's just a photo of the rear of the King's Head Centre taken from White Horse Lane. So the application relates to part of the first floor accommodation. The site is within the conservation area and King's Head Centre is a Grade 2 listed building. The current application follows an appeal being dismissed for a change of use of the same floor space to a residential flat. And it was also perhaps worth mentioning that this application was deferred from the July Central Area Committee to provide the applicant with the opportunity to provide some more information. However, despite receiving more information, officers still have the view that the proposal isn't acceptable in principle, and the amended proposal, along with the additional information submitted, has not fully overcome the reasons why the previous appeal was dismissed. Whilst additional information has been submitted since the previous Central Area Committee, it is not materially different to that submitted originally, and it's still considered as not been demonstrated that the proposal complies with policy E3, i.e. that it hasn't been demonstrated the existing business or service is not and cannot be made viable, and effective marketing has not been undertaken. There's also the other issue that no financial contribution towards RAMS had been made or secured, despite the applicant having been provided the opportunity to do so. So the proposal is contrary to the local development plan and again, as I said before, has not overcome the reasons the previous appeal was dismissed, and it is recommended for refusal as set out in section 8 of the report.
Thank you, Ms Matthews. We have public participants for this planning application. In line with the public participation scheme, I now invite the agent for the application, Mr Tim Farley, to speak, and may I remind you, Mr Farley, that you are allocated 2 minutes only for public speaking in accordance with the scheme. And I hope, Mr Farley, you will see a clock.
Not yet.
Right. Okay, Mr Farley, can you see the clock? Yes, I hope you can see that. So when you're ready, you may begin, and we'll start the clock as soon as you start speaking. Thank you very much. You may begin, Mr Farley.
Okay. Mr Chairman, members. Thank you very much, Mr Chair. The applicant provide detailed marketing which demonstrates that the unit has been suitably marketed in a typical way for a property of this scale. The applicant would note that the same marketing is considered acceptable for the next item on the agenda, which relates to a former B1 Class E unit. The report criticises the marketing done for being done on an all inquiries basis. However, the report neglects to highlight that the use classes order was changed in April 2021, more than 2 years ago. As a result of the changes, a medical community use can operate from any vacant office unit without needing planning permission, because they are both now Class E uses. So marketing this unit for medical use specifically for the last 2 years would have been pointless. There are two key policies relevant to this decision. E3, and the lots of space for a medical use that could now operate from any vacant office, and policy E5 that supports the use of the unit for tourism. As decision makers, you are perfectly at liberty to apply greater weight to either one of these policies, and you needn't be constrained by the other. You can favour policy E5 and bring the unit into a viable tourism use that brings more visitors and spending to the town centre, or you can favour policy E3 and condemn the unit potentially to 2 more years of vacancy and fruitless marketing. The unilateral undertaking for the RAMS contribution is awaiting signature on the bank, but this will be returned to you as soon as possible, and it is reasonable for the members to resolve to approve the application subject to the receipt of that legal document. It's also worth noting that since the units have been vacant for more than 3 months,
you're coming up to you're nearing your end, Mr Farley.
What the officer's report implies, the applicant and could use not take the G part MA of the GPGF to change the use
Mr. Farley,
residential land.
Mr. Farley, I,
Consider this to be beneficial to the town centre and the district as a whole. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Farley. Yes, you just went over slightly your time. I apologise. We had a rather, so we heard you, but it was a bit muffled. So apologies for that. I think we got the gist of your comments, but thank you very much. Members, I now invite you to put any questions or make any comments you have on the report. Councillor Lagan.
Thank you, Chair. I couldn't quite catch the bit about the RAMS contributions through the. If anybody can put me clear, was there a signed undertaking in place for the RAMS contributions we submitted?
Through you, Chairman,
Yep.
the agent, as far as I could see, said that the unilateral undertaking was with the bank for signing, but it's not finished yet, and it will be submitted as soon as possible. And suggesting that the council could approve the application subject to that unilateral undertaking being completed.
Any other comments? Councillor Spenceley? Councillor Paula Spenceley?
Thank you, Chair. I was purely going to say that the RAMS contribution could, of course, be conditioned, I believe. The other point that I also did want to make was that reading policy E1 of the LDP and the possible exceptions to that the implementation of that policy, I'm not completely convinced that this doesn't comply. Although it's not specifically an employment use, it would generate employment. And so I find that rather odd. I also find the idea that that this could, I think maybe with regard to the marketing, given all the documents that have been submitted, I do find it rather odd that we are still seem to be deciding, or the officers have decided that sufficient marketing has not been carried out. I don't see that would be in the interest of the owner after so long in any case, and certainly the paperwork that I've read seems to indicate that it has. So I'm a little bit puzzled by that, but that's all I want to say at this stage. Thank you.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. What I'd like to say comes from me being chairman of the High Street Focus Group as well, is that in terms of tourism, it's an excellent idea to have facilities like this available on our high street. It is the centre of our town. It is the area that most tourists would want to look at the attractions that we offer in our high street. Secondly, doing a simple Google search today, I found that there are 8 osteopaths located within the Maldon district, within 5 miles of my postcode at home. So for the change of use, I can't see that being a major problem at all, as there are 8 other osteopaths available for people within 5 miles. The marketing aspect, I believe the applicant marketed the property at a very difficult time, considering COVID was in abundance for a 2-year period. So marketing any kind of office unit during that time and following government guidelines, etc., I think it would be very difficult to undertake a sale of any kind of apartment for working purposes. I can't see there being any problem in accepting this application at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings. Any other comments or views? Are we? Yes, Councillor. Yep. Yes, Ms. Matthews.
Just a couple of responses to what's been said. RAMS contributions can't be conditioned. We can have unilateral undertakings and legal agreements for it because it's a financial contribution. We can't put a condition on in the normal way that we would put conditions on requiring samples of materials or something, anything like that. That's quite clear. You mentioned policy E1. That isn't in the reasons for refusal. Officers aren't saying that the proposal contravenes E1, it is just E3. We talk about E1 in the report, but the reason for refusal is purely is E3, and that's on the basis that the premises is a community use. It's not refused specifically because it wasn't osteopath. Yes, there may be many other osteopaths in the area, but it's more looked at more in more general terms than osteopath. Officers wouldn't expect only an osteopath to go back in there. It could be any sort of community use, which is quite wide, and maybe even a non-business use. But and just to clarify, officers aren't saying that a proposed holiday let in the town centre wouldn't be a good thing. The issue here is the existing use, or the existing lawful use that will be lost. So if that wasn't an issue, officers would be recommending approval. It's the loss of the existing use, not the use that's proposed. Just to make sure that that is clear, that officers aren't trying to downgrade tourism or stop tourism growing in the town. It's about the loss of the existing use, and that is a policy requirement, and that's obviously the starting point, and that's how the application has been assessed. Yes, the property has been marketed but as set out in the report, the officers feel there are failings in that marketing period and the information that's been provided. And in trying to be consistent between applications, officers feel that they haven't done quite enough. Yeah, it's possible that they could do more, but in this case there hasn't been enough done to date. But thank you.
Thank you, Ms Matthews. Councillor Stilts. Oh, sorry, Councillor Miller.
I would like to propose acceptance of this approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder to that proposal, Councillor Stilts?
I'll second that.
Right, any...
So we put in the universal undertaking. Sorry, I'm new to this. So.
Sorry, is it unilateral? Sorry, unilateral undertaking. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Including that. Thank you.
Okay, so that's the motion then, that it's accepted based on a unilateral undertaking. Okay, for the RAMS. So we've got a proposer, Councillor Stilts.
I will still second that.
You'll still second that. Any other comments people want to make? No. Can we have a vote? Those in favour of that motion, please? Unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. That's carried.
Sorry, can we just clarify if there's any conditions, or whether that can be delegated to officers to agree with the chairman?
Probably, but Councillor Stilts?
Yeah, I would say we delegate the conditions to officers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
That seems sensible, yes.
Yeah, so just to clarify, it would be things like conditions to make sure it does actually remain as a holiday let and doesn't end up being a house, because obviously that's the main reason why the council is approving it and refused the application for a house. And then that's the main one that comes to mind, that perhaps wouldn't be applied to other applications, but in this particular case would be necessary.
Okay, thank you, Ms Matthews. All right, we move then on to item 6, found on pages 25 to 40. Ms Matthews, can you present a report for this that relates to the same overall property, though obviously a different part of the same property?
My microphone on this time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, so this is the. So we've got. Before I start, I have put a presentation for both applications 6 and 7. I don't know whether if he wants to consider them together, I can do them separately, but just before I
let's let's do them separately,
okay.
if that's all right. Just
okay. Yeah. So just ignore the writing on there for the next item. Then imagine it's not there. Right, let me just get my notes up. Yeah, so this is a planning application for a change of use from offices, Class E, and part of an existing flat to a short-term holiday let accommodation, which is sui generis, and associated works to part of the first floor fronting the high street, including installation of secondary glazing. So again, similar to the previous presentations, got the application site there with the high street on the north to the north and Whitehorse Lane to the south. This application relates to rooms that front onto the high street. So this is facing north here. So the orange area is the proposed holiday let. So this is an existing first floor, cross-hatched the floor space that is subject to the application. And this room here currently forms part of a flat, an existing flat that would be incorporated into the holiday let if planning permission were to be granted. Part of the proposal is for secondary glazing to be added to the windows of the, in particular, the high street elevation, to in interest of creating a acceptable quality of life environment for the occupiers of the holiday let. And there's also some other windows that are proposed for secondary glazing as well. That's just a photo of the front, which you're all very familiar with, I'm sure. So this application differs to the previous application in that the existing use, the use to be lost, is primarily office use and not a medical or community use. So therefore, the policies that apply will be slightly different. So E1 is applicable, but E3 isn't in this case. The previous appeals for the change of use of the same floor space to a residential flat was dismissed as the adverse impacts, i.e. the loss of the employment use and the uncertain listed building and living conditions effects, significantly and demonstrably outweighed the benefits of the provision of additional residential flat. The current application seeks to address these concerns through the submission of additional revised supporting information. Whilst the issue of the loss of employment has been addressed because the application is now for a commercial use rather than a purely residential use, it considered the proposal not acceptable because there is continuing uncertainty in terms of the impact on the listed building and the living conditions within the flat. And again, the necessary financial contribution to all RAMS has also still not been secured or paid. And while some of the inspector's concerns have been addressed, for example, in relation to the installation of secondary glazing, similar concerns to those raised by the sector still remain, as explained in the report. The application is supported by a noise survey and assessment, which concludes that satisfactory noise levels within the holiday unit could be provided, subject to soundproofing works, including secondary glazing, air conditioning units, and an internal acoustic lining. But due to the lack of details and certainty that all of these measures could be installed without causing harm to the listed building, it cannot be concluded that an adequate quality of life could be provided. Yes, so on that basis, it's recommended that planning permission is refused. I did write to the agent a while ago now, and certainly before the reports were finalised, setting out a number of questions and queries, and there were certainly inconsistencies in the application, and trying to seek clarification on this issue of the noise attenuation measures that were proposed, and requiring details to be provided so that our conservation officer could assess fully the impacts of the proposal on the listed building. But I've had no response whatsoever, so on that basis I didn't have any choice but to assess it based on what was originally submitted and reach the conclusions that have been reached. But so the application is recommended for refusal for the reasons set out in your agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Matthews. Now, primarily this is about change of use, isn't it, for agenda item 6, and 7 will be actually the changes that will be made.
Alterations to the listed building.
Yeah. We have again public participation. So, Mr. Afar, you have an opportunity to speak. You have 2 minutes. Hopefully the sound will be a little better than last time, I hope. I hope you can see the clock. So when you're ready, please begin.
Yes, thank you. So the same response with regard to the unilateral undertaking, that's with the bank, will be sent back to you as soon as possible. Prior to submission, we went through a pre-application consultation with Tim Howson, the Conservation Officer, and we were encouraged that the consultation response is satisfied with the secondary glazing. The consultation queries a reference in the noise report to external insulation. I can confirm that the report discusses internal insulation to the external walls, and the report is slightly imprecisely written, but no further insulation is necessary or proposed internally or externally to the walls. The noise mitigation is simply the secondary glazing and the use of air conditioning for ventilation. Mr. Howson's consultation response also notes that the location of the proposed air conditioning units are not shown on the plans. This is an error, and we apologise. The air conditioning units have been in situ for about 3 years. They were there when Mr. Howson visited these two planning officer visits, about half a dozen separate planning applications over the last few years, and 2 separate visits by the planning inspector. The applicant apologises that they were installed without the relevant listed building consent, but would argue that they have clearly been sensitively located because nobody has noticed them. However, should the Conservation Officer wish for them to be relocated, there are alternative locations for them that cannot be seen from public viewpoints. The applicant would suggest that members can follow the planning officer's advice from the first item on the agenda and condition the noise mitigation details, which in this case would involve a further site visit by the Conservation Officer and preparation of a single plan. It would not be expedient to refuse planning permission just for this. For reference, I would draw members' attention to the agenda, page 19, where the officer states that noise mitigation measures can be secured through the imposition of a condition.
Mr. Farley, you've had your time. Do you want to just complete your sentence?
And prior to that, on page 19, the report erroneously asserts that the rear building is in
Okay.
situ. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Farley. Views, councillors, questions? Stunned into silence. Well, in that case then, since nobody has any... Councillor Stilts?
Yeah, I recommend that we approve this with the conditions for the noise mitigation, and also the same as last time with the unitary or unilateral... Yeah, unilateral funding.
Unilateral undertaking.
You can just say you.
Unilateral undertaking.
We know what you mean.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stilts. So we have a proposal. Do we have a seconder? Quite a few. Councillor Jennings, I think your hand went up first. You're happy to second that. This is that we accept this application. So this is we've got to go through the listed building process. But as far as this is concerned, then we have a proposal to accept this, and seconded by Councillor Stilts, seconded by Councillor Jennings, subject to a unilateral undertaking. Thank you. We'll get there eventually. Okay. Can we have a vote, please? Those in favour? Unanimous. Okay. Thank you very much. And I think in terms of any conditions, let's put these two together at the end, depending on how this next one goes. Yep, is that?
Yes, I suppose the only thing I'd say is perhaps what I said in response to the first application was in terms of making sure it remains as a holiday let. Those sort of conditions you wouldn't put on the listed building consent, but you would put on the
All I'm suggesting is that since we're relating to the same flat, we sort of, put these two together and then relate those conditions. And we'll have a discussion about that. So we move on to item 7 then, found on pages 41 to 50. And again, Ms. Matthews, this will be quite a similar presentation to your previous one, I'm sure.
Yes, I won't repeat everything, but I'll perhaps read out the description, which is So this is a listed building application seeking consent for works associated with the proposed change of use of the office to a short-term holiday let to part of the first floor fronting the high street, including installation of secondary glazing. So the main plan, I suppose, that's perhaps more of interest, if you like, to the listed building application than the previous planning application is the details of the secondary glazing, which was one of the main issues, or one of the issues that are part of the previous appeal, and one of the reasons why it was refused listed building consent. These details have now come in, so that has gone some way in addressing the inspector's concerns. But in the same way as the officers had concerns about the planning application, there's this inconsistency or the lack of detail about exactly what noise mitigation measures were proposed, and therefore unable to fully assess the impact of the works required to the listed building. Yeah, and therefore there's just one reason for refusal as set out in your agenda papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Matthews. Mr Farley, you have an opportunity again to speak if you wish to. I don't.
Thank you.
Can we? Sorry, Mr Farley. Mr Farley. Can we just wait till we get the clock up? So if you'd like to say something, then we'll just need to make sure the clock comes up. We're almost there. We go. So when you're ready, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just to say thank you to yourself and to the members for the previous two decisions, and we will work with the Conservation Officer and the Planning Officer to provide the necessary details through the discharge, and we'll do that as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Farley. Apologies again, mate. The sound quality is not great, but again, I think we got the gist of your comments, so thank you very much. Members, any comments or questions? Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The comments by Mr Housen was basically talking about the noise mitigation on there, but that seems to have been addressed by some of the mitigations that are being proposed to be put in, and plus the secondary double glazing. Ms Matthews said something that is of interest about where we left on the previous applications the conditions to be delegated to the officers. This doesn't apply to this. There's no further conditions we can place on this because it's purely just the fabric of the building. Is that correct?
Through you, Chairman, if listed building consent were to be granted, there would be conditions that officers would recommend be put on to try. So they would need listed building consent for air conditioning units, for example. At the moment, they're not on the drawings, and we haven't. There was a suggestion that the ones the suggestion that they're already there, but they might be able to be moved somewhere better in terms of the impact on listed building. So there would need to be conditions to control that side of things, the details about where the air conditioning units go, where the was there anything else? So it was mainly the air conditioning units, isn't it? But yes, there would be conditions about details like that, further details to be submitted that I think officers recommend be imposed if the opportunity arose. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Matthews. Yes, Councillor Lagan. Yep.
I didn't even. As I said, I didn't know. I've never noticed those, and I'm up there most days, to be honest. So the applicable conditioning for this not to be a permanent flat to live in, it's as a holiday let. That's in the first two applications, but doesn't apply to this one because it's a different type of application. Just for my learning.
Yes, through Chairman. So that would apply to the planning application. So that's the item 6. But those sort of conditions wouldn't be applicable for a listed building consent. The listed building consent is purely for the physical works to the building required to carry out the change of use. and not for the change of use, hence the slightly different descriptions on the two applications. As officers, we would be happy for you to, if members wish, to delegate conditions for both applications and for us to decide which conditions need to go on which application in consultation with the chairman, obviously in the usual way.
Okay.
Rather than, yeah.
Well, that sounds reasonable. But let's see what other members feel. Any other questions, views? Councillor Lagan?
Seems as me, I therefore recommend approval based on what Miss Matthews says regarding the conditions being delegated to officers.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nick Spenceley. So seconder. So proposal then that this is accepted by Councillor Lagan, seconded by Councillor Nick Spenceley. Can we have a vote, please? Unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. And I think this will be just subject to delegating conditions to officers. That's
Yes, we would agree the conditions with yourself, Chair.
right. Okay, that's fine. That's good. Thank you very much. Okay, on to item 8 then. Any other items of business that the chairperson decides are urgent? None. You'd be glad to know. And therefore, at 8:05, I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your contributions this evening.